Hello everyone, this is Svetlana from Marco 7th. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, Digital Business, the Recipe to Unlock Unlimited Growth Potential, brought to you in partnership with Altimetrik. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. As you can see, at the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will try to answer as many as possible during the webinar, but if a full answer is needed or run out of time, we will make sure to follow up with you in a separate email after the webinar. A copy of today's slide deck and additional help materials are available in the resource list. We encourage you to download any resources or bookmark any links you may find useful. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the help widget at the bottom of your screen. Please expect an email within 2 hours after the webinar with links to download the webinar slides and recording. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator and host of the webinar, Shishir Saxena, APAC Head, Client Strategy and Transformation at Altimetrik. Shishir, it is over to you now.
Thank you, Svetlana. I really appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be an interesting conversation. We have speakers who come from the industry and bring with them a lot of experience about solving problems in the world and the realm of digital business. So today we are going to be speaking to people from institutions which are leading the charge when it comes to making digital business go along for their organization. So I have with me Kirill. Kirill, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the audience, please.
Sure. It's great to be here. My name is Kirill. I'm a VP of the Data Technology and Innovation at Deutsche Bank, based in Singapore. So I'm looking at those three verticals in the APAC region. And yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. We also have Frederick, who's the Chief Digital Officer of Commonwealth Bank. Frederick, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Yeah, my name is Frederick. I'm, as it says, Chief Digital Officer for the Commonwealth Bank. So helping the group set the digital strategy and try to execute on much of it as well. Been in this role now for about 18 months or so. So moved to Sydney for the purpose of taking this fantastic job up. Brilliant opportunity, so much going on in digital. So excited to be here as well.
Excellent, excellent. I am Shishir Saxena. I head the APAC Charter for Client Strategy and Transformation for Altimetrik, which is a product development partner to some of the leading brands all over the world. And in our line of work, we do come across problem statements which help customers, further their charter for digital business. So with that, let me dive right into the topic for today, which is around digital business and the recipe to unlock unlimited potential. Now, the way we will set this up is we will start by getting into this whole world of digital business and how it is transforming the way companies are approaching their markets, even their middle office or back office operations, and then go into different dimensions about what is working, what's not working, and then kind of dive into the experience of the speakers here to learn more and more from them and see how we can apply that into our own companies, our own charters. So with that, let me start with the first question here, which is what digital business is and the impact it has already had and will continue to have on how companies create and realize value, right? So this is something on building the appreciation for what digital business is and how do you see that going further in advancing the charter of organizations. So Frederick, if I start with you, how do you see this whole focus on trying to use digital for coming up with new business models, solving problems in a very different way? What is it doing to organizations? And from your vantage point, how have you seen this evolve?
So maybe we start with the last part of the question there, right? How has this evolved? I think it's important to look back to get the context right. So if we go back in time, maybe, 10, 15 years or so, much of what was digital transformation at the time was about taking something that we were familiar with from the physical world and converting it into something digital. So traditional, what I tend to talk about is digitization. So optimizing processes, a little bit of automation, basically porting something from physical to digital. Then what has been going on over the last few years is then much, in my opinion, much more interesting, because then you're starting to see a shift towards creating new offerings, new digital offerings that didn't have a physical precedence. So stuff that we had never seen before in the physical world now start popping up as digital. And I guess the metaverse is sort of the extreme thinking around that. And maybe we'll get to that towards the end, Shishir. But I think that's anyways the direction. So stuff that has not had a physical precedence. And the challenge with that then is getting organizations that have maybe often been around for some time to start thinking in those terms. You have to start being very creative about how do you create new business values and new offerings, because you can't really just take what you have on the shelves and digitize it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this is a very good perspective. Kirill, if you could just add to it, because I'm sure through your career you've seen this evolve as well. What is your take on how digital business is making its mark, and what does it mean for organizations who want to be relevant over a long period of time?
Yeah, sure. I think my focus on this would be, I would say it sort of resonates with a lot what was just said, right? For me, it's also about the customer experience and being customer-centric, right? Historically, especially from the financial institutions, we've seen, the services that been provided were, I would say, at first basic. You want to have money, safely stored in the bank so that you can always come and take them at the necessary time. What we see now is, it's not only about security, but it's also about convenience. It's also about providing the services that customers never even thought about. Like when you're talking about, they can process their transactions, cross-border transactions within a second with the low costs and everything. So there's a lot of services that are being historically very difficult and very inconvenient to the customers nowadays. Is we all strive to give them the best possible customer experience, and I think that's the digitalization business is going to grow towards that even further, right? By providing services that is very convenient, very easy to use, and everyone can have access to.
Absolutely. And, different economies, I believe, are adopting it at a different pace, depending upon how mature the underlying infrastructure is. And an example would be in a place like India, something like getting yourself a rental apartment used to be, you get together with the real estate guy, go around looking for places. And now the guy or girl just sends you a video of a walkthrough that he or she would have done from the property on WhatsApp. So it's not like they have a platform for their tool. It's just a very low cost way of giving the consumer, the prospective renter, a view into what the shelf space looks like and everything else. So one thing is it's absolutely pervasive, and the other is the combinations and permutations on how people are leveraging channels and trying to take what works for them in their business model and letting the other evolve is something very interesting. So I really believe this is going to even go much beyond from here, and we look forward to how this evolves. Now, when we look at digital business, it's a given, right? So if you go to any board meeting, the focus first is how are you getting that charter right? How are you moving towards making sure that all the projects, all the transformation engagements that are on the charter are on time, on schedule, and are giving the value that the company went about it. But then there are more often than not situations when things are being revisited because they're not going as per plan. It's just very hard for companies, despite knowing that this is the right thing to do, to actually make it happen. Now, there are multiple dimensions of it, right? So what do you think, Kirill, from your perspective, right, across the dimensions of leadership, culture, etc., what is your take on why, despite having the right level of focus, it's just so hard to get this thing done when it comes to digital business transformation?
Yeah, it's a very good question, right? And it's tough to answer, with just, I would say, with a given time. But what I think is as you're mentioning, right, in your question, there's a leadership mindset and so on and so forth, right? We're talking about the financial institutions, and if you look at the sizes of financial institutions, we are talking about thousands of people, right, working there. So there's a few barriers that you have to overcome the mindset in the first place, right? So how do you convince everyone in this organization that there is a better way of doing things, right? How do we make sure in the first place that people believe in your in your sort of goal and a target, and they all working towards that, right? And it's especially it's challenging when you have people of that come from background when everything was like half manually done, right? And then they say, oh look, but if you tell me to do it this way, how's it going to work, right? So there's a lot of educational process, and obviously we're also talking about digitalization is in a way some people fear that it's going to replace them and so on and so forth. So we have to make sure that we're educating people. It's not about replacement rather than it's enhancement and making things easier for them. Second one is obviously technology, right? So throughout my career, I've been through different banks that try to achieve that I would say goal of being like very digital, almost 100% digital banking, right? And it is tricky, right? Especially we're talking about having legacy core banking systems that can't support some of the things that we want to do, and then pretty much I'm sure everyone in this conference right now is they aware of how difficult it is to change core underlying technologies within big organizations, right? So having those pioneers and I would say leaders and those people that can drive it and to deliver that transformation is very important and crucial for the organization, because you have built this technology debt, and you have built this technology that not supporting what you want to achieve for certain period of the time in the past. So now you need to move fast and need to be able to transform, right? And then I think the most important is obviously it's to making sure that the organization-wise, so the management-wise, and people on the ground, there is a common understanding and everyone on the same page about what you're trying to achieve. It's the hardest thing to do is to deliver a right message, which is simple enough, but everyone understands that, and everyone knows what we're trying to strive, which is a customer experience, which is the experience overall of how people see us and how they interact with our system.
Very good, very good. I think this is, you touched upon a lot of different dimensions here. And I think what the message I'm taking from what you just mentioned, Kirill, is it's not one thing. It's just when you try to move something which has got a legacy to it, which has got a way of doing things, which was very different from what the digital business demands, it just takes a little bit of time to get the whole organization to come behind it, right? So touching across different dimensions. So very interesting. Now, Frederick, from your position as a CXO, I'm sure you have a front row seat into some of these conversations and debates and discussions. So would love to understand from you, how do you look at this challenge?
Yeah, no, look, I think you covered most of it. If I should add anything, it'll be picking up on two of the words that are in the question, and that is industry leaders. Right? If you're an industry leader, it kind of implies that you've been around for a while, and that means that you probably have a number of customers that are already using a number of the products that you've been producing over the years and maybe decades. So we have to find a way to service those or continue to service those as well as creating new things. And that's sometimes a problem where, systems and architectures and products designed in a particular fashion now have to coexist with something that is much more modern and much more digitally native.
Oh, you're so right? There used to be a time when the gold standard for good retail experience used to be Nordstrom, where you would have somebody come in and curate the experience that you want from your wardrobe selection. And now people don't want to be bothered. They have location beacons, which get promotions for the aisle that they're standing in, right delivered when they're actually surfing the price at a competitor's store. So I think you're right. But there are still people who demand or rather look forward to that white glove treatment when it comes to retail experience in this case, but financial services, of course, is leading the charge when it comes to transformation. So very good perspectives. Thank you so much. I'll just move to the next one here, just to further take this whole charter forward. Just give me 1 second. If you don't mind, Svetlana, can you move the question to the next one? I'll read it out while I do that. This is more about, how you're looking at this whole space evolve, right? So partnerships and the kind of ecosystems in which things are happening. So you may not be the company where the search or the buyer journey starts. You might be the one who are just processing the payments. In other cases, you might be the one which has got the promotions part of it, right? So there is this huge shift in which you don't compete as a monolith. You realize that your customers and the competition, everybody actually are part of ecosystems. But then you need to make these connections, right? So your systems need to be interoperable. You need to have the right APIification done so that things can move freely between different organizations with the right level of security. Now, this is not the easiest of things to do, because every other week somebody new would come into the industry and talk about an experience that the consumers demand, but your systems are not ready for it. So this demand of interoperability and being connected to an ecosystem, what is it doing to the technology stack, the development practices, and as leaders who are leading the charge here, and this is for both Kirill, you, because you come from the data side, and Frederick from the overall perspective, what demands is it placing on the enterprises, and how are they really approaching this? Go ahead. Any one of you can take it. Maybe Frederick, you can start. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. So one.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. All right, sorry, man. Maybe the one thing you're on it, right? It's about trying to encapsulate some of the stuff that we've been leveraging before, and I've been doing that for a number of years already in both this and previous roles through APIs. And making sure that you have a standardized way of interacting with different components. But it comes back to scalability, I think. So you have to have something that is scalable and that is open enough for others to interact on. You can't afford the luxury anymore to be a single product line where you just surface your own products to your own customers. You have to realize that you have to collaborate and really be part of something bigger, a bigger experience. And then with that, then comes the customer experience. But I know that Kirill is very passionate about that too. So maybe this is a good segue over to you, mate.
Yeah, I think
good.
Actually, all those good points, and then maybe I will just add on a little bit on that. Is so from my experience back when I was working for Standard Chartered Bank, one of the things we were focusing on was delivering API banking for corporate customers, right? So, and then that's what one of the things that we wanted to achieve is to be able to be part of the ecosystem, right? Be part of the, something that client can use without actually having to, log in our systems, traditional way, and then they can reuse and they can take that information and do whatever they want to do, right? I think it comes to the point as well where banks are actually not, we're not technology companies by definition, right? We shouldn't be the one to drive a technology, decisions and technology, sort of advancements that much on our side. It's more of a, we have more than enough of fintechs. We have more than enough of even customers who's more than capable to delivering their solutions, better than, most of the financial institutions can do at the moment. And this is nothing bad about it, right? So I think they having access and having giving them access to the information that they already have access to through the corporate portals or whatever portals, right? And being able for them to utilize that data, utilize that functionalities from their own systems. That's one way to go forward, right? And looking at, let's say I'm based in Singapore, right? And then I'm looking at how Singapore and MAS, let's say, pushing for the advancements, let's say, recently, I think last year, they rolled out this new regulations, and where all the banks sort of had to follow that is being for customers, they are able to bring their all accounts and the information about their accounts for the retail banking under one roof. So let's say if I'm using one bank, I can get all this information from all other banks that I'm using under one application, right? So, and that's something that, we, as well, it goes back again to the customer experience, right? I want to be able to have an overlook and a summary of all my, assets, all my money, and so on and so forth, right? And that's the way to go forward, right? Obviously, it puts a lot of pressure on the banking to be able to expose it securely and making sure you still can, do your business right and so on and so forth. But you have to be ready, and you have to be, willing and open to, part of the ecosystem rather than being a sole, representative of the ecosystem.
Very, very valid point. I think all the points that both you and Frederick touched upon, more and more companies become ecosystem players. They have to be ready to be partners. And something else in the question, right, which is about development practices. Is there any specific point, Frederick or Kirill, you want to touch in terms of what demands this place on your dev practices itself, right? How you approach development. Do you want to add anything to what you just said, Kirill, maybe on that?
Yeah, I think just one thing is we've seen a transformation of how development is done within banks, right? So traditionally, we always have this sort of approach of waterfall. We define our requirements and we build it. I don't know, it might take a year, it might take 2 years, right? So and then by the time we deliver something, the customers, because of the nature of the market, it changes so fast. Customers might not even want it anymore, right? So that's the problem, right? So now most of the banks, financial institutions, they are moving towards using the agile methodology for running the development, which means you are going through the short cycles of development and deployment and so on and so forward to deliver maybe smaller pieces, but you deliver it on a constant base, and you're getting feedback at much earlier stage, and you don't have to be afraid that once we deliver, do they still want it, right? But you're getting a feedback from your customers straight away. And that's, I think, very crucial in the, especially in the age of where we live in right now, where things changing on like monthly basis or even faster, all this new technologies coming up, all these new approaches and whatnot. And you want to be, you want to be up to the speed, right? So that's what we're doing as well. It's obviously, a lot of financial institutions also moving to the cloud and so on and so forth. But this, like the scale of how you run the things and how you deliver things is very important.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Moving on to something which is, Frederick, more, I would love to, get some pointers from you here, because as the Chief Digital Officer, I'm sure you are presiding over lots of innovation, right? So you are trying to see how companies, not just staying relevant, but actually ahead of the pack. But there is this culture of POCs that has come into play, right? So people do a lot of proof of concepts, and they want to take it to the next level. But then we see that many of them are not able to scale, or they kind of die an early death, if I can call it that, because, there weren't even sponsors to put the money behind it, or some other competing priority comes. But from your point of view, as a leader here in this space, what should change for people to really realize the value of trying new stuff, trying new innovation, and then scaling it? And I'm sure people are doing it well also. So any learnings either ways from that, Frederick, would be very great on how to scale innovation, and how can we ensure that it has the right impact and is not run like a science project on the side.
So I think Kirill was actually on to one of the keys to that, and that is there's actually a good book that's not a waste of time, called Project to Product, that illustrates a lot of this, right? Where you have to shift your mindset from just doing a project, as we have been doing in the old world. You do a project, you hand it over to some kind of organization somewhere who's supposed to run with it. And then you never go back and revisit it. So there's no continuous development, no continuous improvement of it. I think the key really is to shift over to what is then a product mindset, where you would, whatever you do, you develop it as a product, and one of the paradigms that we're trying to introduce is you build it, you run it. So that then guarantees, if you combine that with a persistent funding level and persistent staff levels, around, then you kind of guarantee that the products that you release and the POCs that you create, they get improved over time. I think the traditional funding models and how banks have been operating have been contrary to this philosophy, where you spin up a project, and as soon as you launch it, you're done, and you move on to the next big thing, right? And we've talked about it at CBA around go live is the starting line, not the finish line. And I think that mindset has to go deeper into the banks and financial institutions for the value of POCs to really come to life.
Very interesting. I would actually steal that line. Go live is the starting line and not the finish line. So that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. A good way to look at it. Kirill, you want to add something to it? I'm sure in the data, especially with people trying to do a lot with AI and ML these days, and it's almost like they're trying to take a solution and trying to find a problem for it, right? When it comes to these two things, at least. So a lot of POCs get commissioned, may not see the light of the day, but anything specific that comes to your mind here?
I think it's just more on value for the business as well. So, I mean, we all experienced where, as a business, as a salesperson, you would probably, think about ideas, how to, maybe give a new offering to the customers, let's say even coming from the data side, right? Like we can offer some new dashboards to the customer, reportings or whatnot, right? But that's just an idea, right? We as a business person, you would have certain assumptions and a certain understanding and certain feedback from the customers, but it's never, and unless you give them something tangible, they wouldn't be able to tell you whether they like it this way or they want something else or they want this at all, right? The value of the POCs is very crucial, and it sort of resonates again with the whole agile approach, is that you want to give them something tangible, even maybe it's not fully functional, but something that they can use at the early stage, so that you can deliver. In the end of the day, your target is to deliver something meaningful, right? Something that is valuable to and it's a sort of, yes, POC is the first step, MVP is the second step, right? So you want to go through those steps, and you want to make sure that, you'll get the feedback as much as possible, right? Don't make assumptions based on just your pure vision of how it works. You always have to work with the end user.
Very helpful, very helpful. I think staying true to the business value is something that I picked up from what you said, right? Because you're not just trying to prove a technology, you're trying to prove its value to the enterprise. And that is the true lever through which you then scale it, because once you start seeing the value, you're able to amp it up, put more funding behind it, and have more use cases come into that. So thank you so much, Kirill, for that, and Fredrik, of course. Again, a question which I think will resonate to both of you, as practitioners, as leaders in your own disciplines. I'm sure you have seen there are ways in which certain initiatives do well, and there are certain approaches which probably don't go the distance because of how they are conceived or the scale at which you start the operation. A lot of times, especially for digital, because it's not a cookie cutter thing. It's very specific to that customer, that situation, that use case or enterprise. So how, in your experience, how is taking a bite-sized approach, which is being prioritized and measured, versus going all in from the very beginning, to digital initiatives coming along? And are there any specific learnings that you want to bring from your past experience, or maybe something you're dealing with right now, right? So I'm sure amongst the initiatives, is there a particular approach you've taken to going bite-sized versus going big bang in certain areas? So Fredrik, would love to hear from you on this.
So I don't think that there is a universal way forward on this. It depends very much, because I think, again, a little bit back to the point that I had before. So sometimes you have products and services and offerings out there in market that customers are very used to. I mean, I can take an example very close to home. We got an app that is used by some 7 million or so, 8 million customers every day. Overall, they really love the app, so this is good. But they're also very sensitive, right? So we try to release an update, a refresh to how it looks and feels for customers now about a year and a half ago. And it was not well received by customers, right? So you have to be careful You can't make too much change to existing things because customers are used to dealing with things in a particular way. And it's back to minding the experience. I think, if anything, if there is one universal sort of approach to it, I'd really go for a sort of an experimentation approach and a gradual approach, if anything, so you can test it out with a small subset of your customers and start dialing up as you get feedback on it. But you have to be prepared to dial back down again if the feedback is consistently not what you had anticipated and hoped for. You have to be able to sort of swallow your pride and go back as well, which I think is super important, and not necessarily something like that traditional incumbent banks are very good at, to be honest.
Just a quick follow-up question around that, right? So when you do have these experiments which can be scaled and then you take it upon, how do you plan the resourcing and funding around it? So is it based on certain milestones where if we realize the right value, you then decide to further go all in into it? Or is it is already planned that, there would be a release for this set of customers, then the next period would be time bound? I just want to understand, how does it really play out a little bit?
I think you have to be very open to customers' response, right? And that's one of the real benefits with digital compared to physical. I mean, I've been using the example inside of CBA, saying no one in their right mind would design two physical branches, put them next to each other, and see which one customers like best, and then tear down the one that they didn't like. In digital, that's almost free to try, right? You can tweak and test and try. So it's quite easy to dial up and down, and when you can start seeing value and uptake these days. Collecting that kind of data is relatively easy. You can see how engaged customers are, if they come back for more, if they stay, if they leave, and so on. All of those things can help you drive your investment. And then, of course, you have to tie it to business value. Are we generating value for us and for customers through this? Yes or no?
Excellent, excellent. Kirill, if you can weigh on this, I'm sure when it comes to data initiatives, where you almost start with an art of possible, right? So not many people, especially on the leadership side or at the board level, would be interested in the plumbing behind it, right? So do you have the right data pipelines and stuff? But they would want to realize the business value, the kind of insights you're delivering. So how do you break a large data project, or do you even do that? Is there a certain way that you are now, through your experience, realizing that this is the right way to go forward when it comes to realizing value of data initiatives specifically?
Right. I think it's always important to know that there's no one unique, specifically like a silver bullet way of doing it, right? So there's no right way, per se, to deliver all the projects that you will ever face in your life, right? These are different approaches for the different problems, right? But I think what is very important is, as was just mentioned as well, is the understanding the value at the, understanding the problem and what we're trying to achieve as a value at the early stages, right? So you have, you're going through the process of, prioritization with the business, understanding what is the really crucial and core functionality that you want to get out of it, or like the data, or is it the dashboards, is it reports, or is it some predictions? You need to understand what is the minimum important thing that they want to get out of it, right? And then in terms of the bite size versus having a big bang, right? I think it's also, and go back into the delivery and phase delivery, right? So you want to make sure that you are splitting it into the phases where you say, okay, here's the milestones we want to achieve first, and then we'll reassess, and then we will do analysis of does that make sense, right? And then it's the best approach I found is to have it in a very granular level. So you want to have it, milestones that is actually maybe minimum, but impactful enough, right? So that you can actually do some analysis on top of that. It's funny to say, but you're doing analysis of the analysis, right? So let's say for me, I'm building analytical dashboards and whatnot, but you still have to run and understand the numbers of how many people are actually using it. What are the benefits out of this, specific analysis provided, right? So it's we always joke here is, making sort of analysis of the analysis, right? So, and yeah, it is what it is, right? So you want to make sure that you get the feedback and you listen to it, right? Sometimes it's very personal and you feel like, oh, well, why do they don't like it, right? But the numbers never lie. And in my case, I always look at the numbers, right? So even if it's kind of close to your heart.
That's a very important point, because in some of the initiatives I've been part of, largely on the consumer goods retail side and also in financial services, people do get excited when they see the end result as a mocked up dashboard and stuff, right? And then it's easier to kind of put the funding and the resources behind that end goal. But as people start getting live dashboards to work with or live insights to work with, then they realize what they actually wanted is something different. Yes, it looked well good. So allowing your constituents to play around with what you deliver a little bit before you invest more into it is something that I think over time allows you to realize value and also get the adoption right. Because that's the other thing that I think the industry is really struggling with, is you have these really cool digital Ferraris being built, but then you don't have enough drivers to actually take it to where you want it to be, because you've got all the right stuff, but you've not worked on the adoption part. So it's a good point there. I'll now move to something which I think is something we all struggle with and are always investing more and more into it, which is one of the key building blocks of doing anything, let alone in digital, is about having the right team, the right talent behind it, right? And it's a key building block for this. Now there's a change that was brought about with this pandemic, with this whole hybrid situation. Even institutions as like banks, who are very particular about development being in their four walls, secured physical access, etc., were forced to operate in a very different model, and things evolved from there. We learned, we course corrected in certain situations, but now we're seeing the access of talent being absolutely unhindered global, but at the same time you need to iron out a few challenges that comes with having distributed teams to that level, right? So overall, in this hybrid reality, how have both of you seen this thing evolve, right? So is there any learning you would want to share when it comes to this hybrid workspace, what it does to the talent equation, challenges and opportunities as you see it? So Frederick, if you would want to get started, then I'll definitely have Kirill also weigh in.
Yeah, look, so I think there are constraints to it, at least if you are not a truly global player that has sort of entities in a large number of countries. If you're confined to a few geographies, then you have tax constraints that stop you from having people being anywhere and everywhere in the world. So it sort of prevents or it limits the talent pool as such. But I think what we can see is that we can absolutely offer people a better equation when it comes to work-life balance and where can you operate from. I'll give you an example close to home. I have one of my direct reports who called me earlier this week and say, hey, do you mind if I spend the next 2 weeks at my summer house up outside Byron Bay somewhere? I don't know. I don't care. You can be there. You can be anywhere, sort of almost in the world, but certainly in Australia in our case, right? So that kind of flexibility is certainly being introduced, and I think is going to stay for good. So it offers a new set of advantages that I think we have to be very open to, and I think especially in technology, people are very good at adopting these measures. I feel that in some areas of the bank, people are struggling a little bit more, but in general, I'd say technology, especially sort of engineering cohorts, adopt very, very well to this. I think the only thing that I can be a little bit worried about, that I think we'll see over the next few years, really, is what it does to creativity at scale. Because I think still it is more difficult to read a room virtually than it is when you're in the same physical premises, right? So it's hard to substitute still some of the big room planning sessions that we were used to in the past and so on. But jury's out. We'll see. For me personally, I'm quite enjoying it actually to be able to spend a bit more time at home and save the commute, if nothing else.
Oh yes, the commute is absolutely the the thing that people are not looking to get back into their lives. But it's also about a little bit of a cultural shift, right, Frederick? Because many people I've seen leaders, especially, are used to taking energy from their teams sitting in the room, right? So they would want to have a whiteboarding session, get the volume up, etc. Is that a casualty of this a little bit? And if you were in the way you have moved on in CBA, are there any things that you have adopted to kind of still keep that intact in whatever way possible in a digital world, just from a cultural perspective?
Yeah, I think it is a very good question, Shashir. I think we actually had this up in my leadership team yesterday, and somebody, actually my comms team, asked me, hey, we're going to need another one of those videos from you where you welcome new people to the bank and so on and so forth. And I lost it in the session yesterday. I said, you know what? I don't think I can do another one of those videos. I'm so sick of seeing and hearing myself on video that I don't think I can do another one. So we're going to have to try something else. And I asked them dynamic and more personable than one of these sort of very, very sterile recordings that we've seen way too many of already. So I guess we have to try new tools and new takes on how to interact over video.
I can't agree more with you. It's just one of those things where, we have this concept, what we call as Colabs, right? So these are pop-up offices. If the people can't come to you, we will take the office to the people. So office is what? In the end, it's a bunch of leaders, maybe somebody from the human resources, a financial help desk for their payroll queries, etc. So in the geography of India, wherever we have people concentration, when people moved in the pandemic, we've started taking the leadership team and a few other ancillary functions together with us and have 2 days. Hey, we are in Sheraton. These are the suites booked for you. Come in, schedule something, meet people. And the happy faces we saw, I just came back from one yesterday. In fact, I was in the flight the other day, if you guys recall, when we were speaking, is for one of these collab sessions. And oh, I didn't know you were so tall. I didn't know that you also enjoyed music. And we know so many dimensions of people other than that 2x2 screen that we see every day, and giving and exchanging notes. So totally hear you on that, Frederick. What's your experience, Kirill, on this front, on the talent side? More from when it comes to something as sensitive as data for banks, right? So this is even more important. How have you moved to the hybrid reality, and how have you managed this talent equation in this new hybrid reality?
I think two things, right? So we're talking about first is the access, right? We obviously, as a banking or financial institutions, there was a big challenge, especially for accessing the infrastructure of the banks is one thing, right? But then how do you making sure that for example, when people working with the data in the office, that it's a safe place, it's a secure place. People will not, look around your shoulder and try to, copy the data and use it for any purposes. But then we're talking about people actually working outside of the offices. How do we control that, right? How do we making sure that what they're doing is safe and secure, that the data that they looking at is actually, so there's a lot of education as well for the people who is working with this kind of sensitive information to make sure that they are understanding the consequences of this data being leaked, right? That's one thing. The second thing is obviously the talent, right? And then I think in Singapore, whoever is located in Singapore right now would probably also experience the same thing, is during the pandemic, we had all this wave of, having issues with hiring people, because we can't really, if they're not located in Singapore, then it was really difficult for us to bring them in, right? So, and then another problem is a lot of people felt like they need to stay closer to their families and everything. And traditional scheme of hiring, when you say, oh, you have to come here and you have to come work with us, and you have to be in, based in the same location, didn't work. I think in the future, you also shouldn't be very strict like that, right? We shouldn't be having a forced decision, or we're only going to hire you if you're going to be located here. It doesn't make sense anymore, because we have enough technology, we have enough overlapping hours and everything to be effective and, to work as an organization and work as a team. So I think pandemic actually showed us a lot of benefits of that and how we can actually adapt really fast. There was a lot of fear and a lot of unknown in getting to that, right? And that's why I think it was not really that widely applicable before the pandemic. But because we've been forced, it's sort of showed as well to us that, look, you can do it. You don't have to, it's not that difficult. It's actually achievable. And yeah, I can really agree with the, point that we don't know exactly what the consequences of this going to be in the long term. We can see that, in terms of effectiveness, yes, the teams are still able to work together, still able to deliver. In terms of the creativity, yes, you're missing the speed of the social, connection between the people. I think it's also up to managers as well, a lot on how do they motivate people, how do they connect those people, right? So you can, like one of the examples we were doing is the escape rooms, the virtual escape rooms, to just get, people to talk to each other a little bit more, get them connected and so on and so forth, so that they can actually feel some personal connections with the people, right? Yes, they can't, be physically next to them, but in a sense, we were solving the problem together. We can get to know how people work, and we start to understand each other better.
Excellent. I think these are great points. Something small I started doing somewhere mid last year was, instead of typing long emails, I started leaving voice messages on Teams to people. So we use Teams for collaboration, and it's so much better. And you can at least get a little bit of enthusiasm in your tone, because in a flat email, people just scroll through it, miss the essence of it. So at least where I want somebody to understand the tone and the emotion also behind it, something exciting, new initiative, I just leave a small voice note. And I think that was something that was received well. So good to hear from both of you on this dimension. I would just remind all the listeners here, if you have any questions, please post this and we will take them up. While you do that, I will pick up maybe a couple of questions which have already come in. One of them is very interesting. It's about developing for the end customer is something we all do. But now with this ecosystem economy and systems having to be connected to each other, you're also having the developer persona of the other partner, right? So when you create, say, a merchant portal or you use micro front-end technologies to kind of create something which is interoperable very easily with a different partner, etc., you need to make sure that their developer is easily able to consume what you've delivered or integrate into their system, not just the end consumer experience. Now, this is a relatively newer thing where you're actually developing for the developer persona of your potential partners in the ecosystem. Frederick and Kirill, any of you, Kirill, if you want to get us started, what do you think about this? And is this really becoming more and more pervasive now?
Yeah, I think what I've seen and what I actually worked on is building a sort of, let's say, developer portals. So what that means is we have an externally facing developer portal that explains how the technology works on our side, what kind of APIs we have and whatnot. So whoever is coming and wants to sort of work with us and wants to sort of engage with us and start using our APIs is actually able to have a taste of it before they even proceed, so they can work with this simulator in a sense where they can connect with the APIs. They will experience certain things and they will understand, okay, so this is the information I can get, this is how I'm going to implement it, and so on and so forth. And that just gives them an idea of, especially for the developers from the, coming either from other banks or coming from the other, organizations, whatnot. They don't have to really, spend hours with us on discussing, certain details of how things work. They can experience it themselves, right? And I think this is the moving forward. It has to be going towards that direction. More and more openness, more and more, we should be like, plug and play with each other in a way, right? It's never going to be standardized how we communicate, but it should be easy to understand how you can work with certain systems, right? And I think that's where most of the companies are going. And it's sort of like you can look at that as it's what startups did as well. Since long time ago, they've been open source. They've been exposing the APIs. Everyone can use it, and that's the concept, right? You want to be interconnected between each other, and that's where the value as well comes from. You shouldn't be afraid to be open, because eventually, if you are open and you're offering good services, people will come to you.
Fantastic. I think this is a great point. Anything you would want to weigh in, Frederick, on this particular point?
No, 100% agree, right? The only thing you want to be mindful of is understanding what role in the ecosystem you want to play versus so do you want to curate and own it, or do you just want to participate and provide a commoditized service, right? But I think we see many examples of what Kirill has been talking about. I mean, in Australia, we got open banking now being live for already a year or so. In Europe, we had this through PSD2 a couple of years ago, or a number of years ago already. So that's the direction, right? And it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise for banks, because it forces us to standardize what we do even for ourselves. So we can take down the amount of time we spend sort of interacting with ourselves quite dramatically. I had a good use case in my previous role where we took down the amount of time, the average integration time to our customer database went from 500 hours to 3 hours by setting up a solid set of APIs around it. So that's the kind of interoperability that you need to go for.
I understand. Perfect. I see that maybe Kirill has dropped off, or I think will join us back. But before we go there, one more question from the audience.
I think my laptop got disconnected, but I'm still here.
Excellent, excellent. Good to know that, Kirill. This is also from the audience. This is from Pek Yu Tan from Panasonic Asia. I think this is about trying to, do one of those top 3 kind of lists. So if you were to narrow it down to key reasons that block companies from reaching their growth potential when it comes to digital business, I think it's your 3, Frederick, and then I'll go to Kirill from your top 3 reasons why companies are not able to realize their potential when it comes to leveraging digital business.
I can almost boil it down to one to rule them all, if you like. So I think, and I made this mistake myself, but I think the key thing to keep in mind is you cannot allow the digital strategy or technology strategy to stand on its own independent of your business strategy. There's so much technology and so much digital options out there that you cannot possibly get into all of them and be successful. So in order to prioritize which ones do you focus on, which one do you bring in now versus which ones do you put on a parking lot and maybe you revisit them in 6 months and so on, you have to go back to what is your customer proposition and what is your business strategy. Now, with that, you go and then you select which technologies, which digital opportunities do I go after. I remember a number of years ago when I went all wrong on this was a time when it was just the time when fintechs was coming for everyone, was the perception, and new technologies were popping up right, left, center. And I devised a digital strategy that tried to do everything from quantum computing to blockchain to cloud to you name it. Right? And we failed miserably because we tried to do a bit of everything and it's just not possible. So my strong advice would just be go back, figure out what's your business and customer proposition, then you select the technologies. We do this where I am now, and things like quantum computing, we take a great interest in it, but we're not going to weave it into what our digital strategy is going to be for the next year or two. Right? So you just have to be selective.
This is such a distilled advice, Frederick. I really appreciate that because it's so easy to get distracted, right? So there's so much happening out there. And as they say, just because there are 100 parties in the town, you don't have to go to every one of them, right? So pick the ones that make sense for you and then be very deliberate about it and then go all in after that. So very good. Kirill, do you want to weigh in on that, please? Your top 3 for why companies can't realize their potential when it comes to digital business.
I think I 100%, even 150% agree on the, not forgetting what your core value is and what is your, sort of what business are you doing, right? So, as Frederick just mentioned, if you're a financial institution, you shouldn't, think that, even though this can be beneficial to you to do, I don't know, quantum computing and whatnot, it shouldn't be your primary target of, trying to invent that, right? So you shouldn't be doing that. You should be open to the collaboration and should be open to, utilizing the technologies or the services of, that is available on the market, right? So quite often as a technologist, we get a little bit too excited and we get carried away saying like, oh, I want to try to implement it myself. I want to try to do this and this and that. And then you're losing, what you end up doing is you're losing just, very valuable time that you could have been already on the market with the product and, getting something valuable for your customers and acquiring new customers, right? So then the second thing I think is the mindset, right? So the mindset is very, very important, and it's quite often, not taken into consideration, right? There's I've seen scenarios where companies go and say, "Oh, we're becoming more digital. We have a strategy and everything," right? But you go just a few levels down from the top management, and you talk to people on the ground, and they say, "Oh, well, they say something, but I don't really know what that means," right? So the sort of promoting that mindset to not only have it as an idea on the top of your organization, but also that everyone, from up to down understands what that means and what it means to them specifically, why we're doing it, and so on and so forth is very important. The communication and, that's a key to that, right? And last but not least, I guess, is it's a risk, right? And risk awareness is the sort of a very important thing, and quite often it comes to the point where companies are afraid to take a risk, right? And then they say, well, look, we worked this way for, so many years. We've been successful, but you tell me that we should be changing our technologies or we should be changing the ways we work with customers just because, some other companies do that, right? So quite often I see is that sort of, afraid of taking a risk and afraid of, sort of stepping outside of the comfort zone in which you were sort of working for quite some time is also, the biggest, sort of barrier in getting there where you want to be.
So now I know we are just 2 minutes away from the end of the session, but I'll still indulge myself in one last thing because you can't have a digital conversation without talking about Metaverse. So 30 seconds, Frederick and Kirill, what is it to financial services, banking? Do we see anything cool coming soon? Your early take on this. I just had to ask this question. I'm sorry.
Well, we don't have anything tangible in store around the corner, at least. I'm very curious to see how the latest move from JP Morgan is going to pan out. I think that's going to be interesting to follow and see. But it's one of those things. It's not a place where we're seeing tremendous value in the immediate term. So, but I'm personally, as a technologist and as a digital sort of individual, I'm intrigued and following it closely.
That's like most of us here. Kirill, your take?
I guess similar, right? So I think the Metaverse is very broad, and if you go online, it's kind of difficult to even find what is the exact definition of the Metaverse. Each of the sort of first movers will put it in a slightly different way, but we've seen the rise of the NFTs. We've seen the rise of the sort of even digital real estate and whatnot, right? But it's so sort of backed by the same concept of having the sort of cryptocurrencies as a trading mechanism there and whatnot, right? So I think for the banks, and it's not my bank specific or what I've seen across the different banks, is that a lot of them moving towards having or being providing a provider of the digital custodian services, like that you can bring your bitcoins, whatnot, and have it safely stored with us. But that's just one way of going towards that, right? So banks are usually not so fast in jumping on the train of this new trends, but it's definitely, we've seen it similar with the cryptocurrencies. It's something that is on the radar, and it's always, will be interesting to see, right? So if this is grows, if this is actually happening, and there's more going to be trading within the specific platforms with specific blockchains, whatnot, right? Then that makes maybe sense for financial institutions to be part of this, right? And then we see that governments anyway introducing more and more regulations around it. So this is going to be interesting space anyway.
Yeah, I think intrigue is the word I'll go with. So keen and intrigued. So I think we've had a wonderful discussion. I'd really like to thank Frederick here and Kirill for your valuable insights. You come from a position where you had so much to share. Thank you so much for sharing your views with us. I'm sure the recording would be of value to the members also. Svetlana, I will get back to you.
Thank you, Shishir, and thank you all for sharing these great insights indeed, and for being so generous with your time today. Just a quick reminder to look out for an email within the next 2 hours with links to download today's materials and access the recording of the webinar. And if you would like to learn more about Altimetrik services, you can request a demo or book a meeting directly with Shishir by clicking widgets, request demo, and book a meeting. We'd also like your feedback, so if you could take a minute to answer our very brief survey that will pop up on your screen at the end of the session, that would be very much appreciated. On behalf of Altimetrik and Marco 7's webinars, we would like to thank you all for joining us today, and we do hope that you will be listening in at our next webinars. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Svetlana. Thank you, Frederick. Bye.